The issues around policing and safety will be key when Londoners go to the polls in 7 weeks' time to elect a mayor. The only new candidate is the Liberal Democrat Louisa Porritt. At her campaign launch, she told our political correspondent Simon Harris that Met Police Chief Dame Cressida Dick should resign over how the weekend's vigil was policed.
Covid has taken the razzle-dazzle out of politics, so when Louisa Porritt launched her campaign to be London's next mayor in her local, it was, thanks to lockdown, a low-key affair. The Liberal Democrat candidate used her speech to attack the Met's handling of the Sarah Everard vigil.
The police response was utterly shameful. From start to finish, the Met Police got it horribly wrong, and that's why the Commissioner must go.
Afterwards, she spoke to me in the empty beer garden.
I think that she hasn't shown that she's learned any lessons from what happened on Saturday night, and it's not the first mistake either.
Do you think she will go?
I don't know. There aren't many people that are joining us in this call, and I think that that's wrong. I think other politicians should be a bit more bold.
In May 2019, Porritt was one of 3 London Lib Dems elected to the European Parliament, a job which lasted 7 months because of Brexit. Now she wants to be mayor, but there's a mountain to climb. The City Hall elections have proved disappointing for the Lib Dems. In 2012 and 2016, their candidate for mayor ended up in 4th place, behind the Greens. And there's only one Liberal Democrat on the London Assembly. The Lib Dems' hopes for this election have already suffered one setback. The original candidate, Siobhan Bonita, pulled out last year after the election was postponed because of the pandemic. The party's lone Assembly member, Caroline Pidgeon, thinks the mood in London has changed.
We saw what happened at the weekend, how the police acted in London. Louisa speaks for that generation of women who feel so let down by the police and authorities. She is the voice for London, and the time is right for the Liberal Democrats.
Louisa Porritt says her campaign will focus on jobs, housing and clean air. Simon Harris, ITV News, Belsize Park.
But first, campaigners across the capital have been talking about their concerns that a policing and crime bill passed this week will curb protests in London. The new law will ban demonstrations around parliaments, which have a long history of evoking positive change. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Protests have always been a powerful part of London's political landscape. Some demonstrations become defining moments. The anti-poll tax march in 1990 led to a riot and ultimately the downfall of Margaret Thatcher. When the Countryside Alliance organised a march in 2002 to oppose the ban on hunting, it was said to be London's largest demo since the 19th century. The following year saw an even bigger turnout when hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets to oppose war in Iraq. Last year's Black Lives Matter march may come to be seen as a turning point in the fight for racial equality. But now ministers want the police to have greater powers to control demonstrations.
Demonstrations cause disruption, and I think we have to recognise that as part of people's freedom of expression, those things are going to happen.
Even peaceful protests can bring the capital to a standstill. Extinction Rebellion did just that when activists blocked Waterloo Bridge and Oxford Circus in 2019.
We are in very desperate times, and that's why we've chosen to take to non-violent civil disobedience as what I say is a last resort. People have marched, they've done petitions, we've tried all these things. People write to their MPs. What does it do?
Alan is a disabled rights activist and protester. Extinction Rebellion caused him problems.
Because I couldn't get through the Extinction Rebellion protests, I was having to do detours. So I flattened the battery in my wheelchair and I got stranded.
The new bill gives police powers to curb protests by setting maximum noise limits, start and finish times, and preventing protests near Parliament.
This bill, from what I've seen of it, seems to get it about right. It seems to allow legitimate protest. It would cause problems for people who wanted to park a boat at Oxford Circus or who wanted to build a scaffold outside the law courts in the Strand and just stop everybody moving around for weeks.
Campaigners will continue to organise protests and marches on the capital's streets, but the ground rules might be about to change.
And the conversation about that bill will continue on the late debate tonight.
On the programme tonight, we'll be discussing what those new restrictions will mean for protests on the streets of London. We'll also be asking how the Met got it so wrong during last weekend's Sarah Everard vigil. I've been talking to former Deputy Assistant Commissioner Lord Brian Paddock, now a Lib Dem peer.
I don't have any criticism of the officers on the night on the front line. They were just obeying the orders of their senior officers. And I think their senior officers put them in an impossible situation. We know when you ban a vigil like this, it is bound to end in trouble.
I'll be joined in the studio by 2 London MPs and by a Baroness who was a member of the Metropolitan Police Authority. That's the Late Debate here on ITV after news at 10.
Good evening, I'm Duncan Golestani. Police are searching for 2 men after the murder of a teenager in East London. Hussein Chowdhury was stabbed to death in Walthamstow on Wednesday evening. The 18-year-old was in his first year studying law at SOAS University. His lecturer spoke of her deep shock at the loss of such a talented student. Our correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Hussein Chowdhury's friends said prayers today at the spot where he was murdered. Throughout the day, flowers were left outside the family home, some from people he knew, some from strangers. Hussein was stabbed in the neck on Wednesday evening in full view of rush hour traffic on the busy Lea Bridge Road in Walthamstow. He was just 18 years old, a promising law student and the 6th London teenager to die this year. Police won't confirm reports that Hussein was attacked by someone who turned up at the house to buy a designer jacket. Whatever led to the confrontation, it began inside the house and ended up on the pavement. Hussein's mum and one of his brothers were also injured. 2 off-duty doctors tried to save Hussein's life, but there was nothing they could do.
This is a tragedy for the family, and my heart goes out to them. You know, I really, you know, I'm so sorry for their loss, but we're doing everything we can to identify those responsible, and we'll do everything we can to try and get justice for them.
A message on the family's fundraising page said he left this world the same way he came in, cradled in his mother's arms. He died bravely, defending his family from cowardly attackers whose only way to defeat this lion was with knives. Across the street from where Hussein lived is the mosque where he worshipped.
Hussein actually grew up here because obviously we've had this mosque about 8 years, and he was a little toddler when he used to come around about 10 years old, and obviously he grew up with his parents, and we used to see him almost every Friday, yeah.
Like his 2 brothers and sister, Hussein was a student at SOAS University of London in Bloomsbury.
Hussein was a young, bright, intelligent young man, and it's a huge loss to both SOAS, his family and his friends, so in deep shock.
I've spoken to his criminal law tutor, and he was doing very well in his criminal law class, and here he is, the victim of a horrific crime. I mean, we just have no words.
The police say they're looking for 2 men they want to question about Hussein's murder. Simon Harris, ITV News, Walthamstow.